now that landscape has changed, right? You have this whole LLM space, and
Yeah.
with the launch of the newest LLM from OpenAI, which I have personally seen it's quite fundamentally better, right? And I think I also seen that you quite frequently use LLMs in your
Yeah.
posts, writing them, figuring
Yeah.
out, right? Uh, so how do you see, how given this, right? How should someone strategize, or how should someone position themselves to make the best out of this new tech, right? How should they leverage this?
What I would say there is try it out first with a few examples. So, for example, I actually started out with using Copilot. In a way, it was kind of a funny way how I tried it out because I was working on a presentation and I gave a few bullet points to Copilot and I asked him, can you actually make a story based on this? Basically, I meant storytelling. But the funny thing, it actually made like a fairy tale from it.
Oh,
And I
I
find
see.
it actually so cute that
Uh,
he could kind of make fairy tales, although I actually wanted to have like a professional version. But in that way, I kind of loved it more doing. And in
mhm.
that way, I just tried a few things and then you can also easily generate images with it. So in that way,
Right,
you kind
right.
of can enhance your blog. So that's kind of a way I liked it. Some of the other things I did next was actually rebuilding like a scenario from the past and
Mhm.
seeing like because the challenge what you have in you when you work in bigger companies is you have people from various backgrounds.
Yeah,
In that
yeah,
way it's harder to explain a story
yeah,
or
yeah.
a situation to a lot of people, and therefore I was thinking like let otherwise use the LLM to kind of simulate a company with different type of roles,
Right,
people from different countries and
right,
everything. And in
right.
that way, I built like a company. I built like a scenario where a tech lead needed to get to a consensus with a lot of
Right,
people.
right,
And in
right,
that way,
right,
I could really show like how complex communication actually is.
right,
And
right,
then
right.
I say like, therefore, it's better to actually have like a tree-like org structure. And that
Oh,
was
I see.
all actually a lot of things I could use the LLMs for. So basically,
Right.
how I see it is you can build out a really complicated mathematical proof, but
Oh, I see.
still write it out as a blog post. And that's kind of what I really loved about this. What I do on top of it is, for example, translating
Mm-hmm.
blogs to Dutch,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
my native language. But
Oh, I
then on
see.
top of that, it's also important to know that depending on the culture you're from, you're explained something differently. For example,
Right,
some
right,
cultures might be really elaborated when they're saying something, and the
right.
other side, things might become like much shorter. So in
Sure.
that way, I could really show the differences in like how you use LLMs for this. This is more close to like how it would be expected in this country. This is more close to
Sure.
how it's expected in Europe. And then also what's interesting is at the business world, you always use metaphors, right? Main
Yeah.
challenge is when you have, for example, sports metaphors, they are like
Mm-hmm.
dependent on the country. They might be using
Right,
different
right.
things.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And therefore, what I did is imagine now instead of using sports metaphors, yes, let's use
Mm-hmm.
dance metaphors or let's use
Yeah.
game metaphors. And in that way,
Right.
you can just tell things in completely different ways, make it more
Yeah,
fun. And
yeah,
that's kind
yeah.
of the way I'm doing it. And then finally, where I'm also started using it for now is programming, because I'm currently working on an MVP based on like all the successes that I had now actually with
Right.
my impressions on LinkedIn. So it's helpful there to kind of just refresh a bit some of your programming knowledge, get like some basic code running.
Right,
And then
right.
finally, what was the other one? I still had like one good example there. I'm also using it actually for primary classification now. So where I would use in the past actually support factual machines. You can
Okay. Okay.
actually now use, for example,
LLMs.
Gemini to
Uh-huh.
LLMs to just like classify actually your blog posts. And that's also
I see.
pretty
Yeah.
cool. So like you can say a hit parade of your blog post, or you can give it other types of categories, and that just makes it all much easier to do.
Great, great. Yeah, I think you made a very good point around being able to communicate the same message in
Yeah,
different cultures and actually be able to tune it and do it the very
yeah,
fast speed, right? Without actually even being exposed to all those cultures, right? You don't need to be probably
yeah,
a Korean or a Chinese person to actually know uh, how to probably add some aspects of the culture or use
yeah,
some analogies to communicate the message better. Yep, yep, great. So I personally very recently had to do a grunt job where I had to basically share a bunch of transactions because I had
yeah,
to share this with authorities, right? And this was a very tedious task. I was kind of postponing it for quite a long of time. But then I just realized that maybe I could try just taking a few screenshots, sharing it
yeah,
with the ChatGPT, and ask it
yeah,
to basically categorize and give me a neat table.
yeah,
And it actually did that. And I verified a few of the transactions. It was working fine. And what I thought would probably take a couple of hours was just done in 10 minutes. Uh,
exactly.
yeah, like it's amazing how you can actually leverage it. It's all down to your creativity, right?
Yeah,
How you can.
exactly. And also, what you can do is, for example, when you draw out an architecture of something, you can
Mm-hmm,
also
mm-hmm.
give that as a picture to your LLM, and it will actually also write out a story about it. So in that
Oh,
way, it's
nice.
also just speeding things up, because sometimes it's
Yeah,
just easier for ourselves to draw something out, but it's not necessarily when we draw something that we understand that the other
yeah,
side will
yeah, yeah,
understand it.
yeah,
It just makes life so much easier.
yeah, yeah. I think it's like this tool that you can communicate with. It's going to
Yeah,
like kind of like play and chat with, to figure things out, and it just makes learning or just getting information or just faster. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
And yeah. Or you can just relate it. For example, you know a concept from the past, you hear
Yeah,
something new, and then you can
yeah.
ask it, how does it relate to that? Is it completely new, or is it just something more related to this? And it just makes it more amazing to work,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
can move so much faster. It's sometimes tiring to work in this way
Mm,
because
mm.
you can almost get a headache when you're like trying to move so fast, but it's just amazing to see all the things that you can do with it.
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, one more area where very frequently I've been using it is within Databricks. So they
Okay.
have this their own AI. So oftentimes you have some queries where you're missing certain syntax and stuff, right?
Yeah.
You produce ask it to fix the query and it will just
Yeah.
fix it. And just yeah, yeah.